You won't hear the collapse when it begins. There is no single sound, no universal alarm. It starts quietly, systems lagging, deliveries delayed, small inconsistencies stacking faster than they can be explained. A missed shipment, a power fluctuation, a delay in clean water distribution that stretches from hours into days. By the time most people recognize the pattern, the system is already compensating beyond its limits. And when a system designed for efficiency is forced into survival mode, it doesn't bend, it fractures. The danger isn't a dramatic event. The danger is the invisible threshold where stability turns into cascading failure, and almost no one is trained to see where that threshold lies. Modern infrastructure is engineered for precision, not resilience. Supply chains operate on just-in-time logistics, meaning inventories are minimized to reduce cost and maximize turnover. This works perfectly under stable conditions, but the moment disruption enters the system, whether from natural disaster, grid instability, fuel shortages, or transportation breakdown, the entire structure begins to lose synchronization. What most people misunderstand is that collapse is rarely caused by a single catastrophic failure. It is the result of interdependent systems failing in sequence. Electricity powers water treatment. Water treatment supports sanitation and health systems. Health systems depend on logistics and communication. Communication relies on power and network infrastructure. When one falters, the others absorb the strain until they cannot. Then the failure spreads. The common belief is that survival begins when the crisis becomes visible. People imagine reacting when the lights go out or when stores are empty. This is the critical error. By the time the collapse is obvious, the most important window, the preparation phase, has already closed. The hidden reality is that survival is determined long before the event, during the period when everything still appears normal. This is where most fail, because human perception is biased toward immediate threats, not systemic risk. The brain is wired to respond to sudden danger, not slow degradation. As a result, early warning signals are ignored, dismissed, or rationalized away. The underlying science is rooted in complex systems theory and failure cascade modeling. In tightly coupled systems, small disruptions can propagate exponentially due to feedback loops. When redundancy is limited, as it often is in optimized systems, there is no buffer to absorb shocks. Power grids, for example, operate within strict frequency tolerances. A slight imbalance between supply and demand can trigger automatic shutdowns to prevent equipment damage. These shutdowns redistribute load, which can overload neighboring systems, causing further shutdowns in a chain reaction. This is not hypothetical. It has been observed repeatedly in large-scale blackouts where entire regions lose power within minutes due to a single initiating event. Evidence from past infrastructure failures shows a consistent pattern. In large-scale outages, recovery is not immediate. Even when power is restored, secondary systems, water pressure, fuel distribution, communication networks, lag behind. During this lag, vulnerabilities increase. Without electricity, water treatment plants cannot maintain purification standards. Without fuel, transportation halts. Without communication, coordination breaks down. The system does not fail all at once, it unravels layer by layer, and each layer that fails increases the stress on the next. This leads to a critical survival implication. Independence from interconnected systems becomes the single most important factor in resilience. Not total isolation, but partial decoupling, the ability to function when one or more systems fail. This is where most preparedness strategies fall short. Stockpiling resources without understanding system dependencies creates a false sense of security. For example, storing food without a reliable method to purify water or cook without electricity creates a gap that becomes critical under stress. True preparation is not about quantity, it is about functional continuity. As the pressure builds, another misconception emerges, that mobility guarantees safety. The idea of leaving a failing area assumes that transportation routes remain viable. In reality, transportation networks are among the first to become congested or restricted. Fuel availability becomes unpredictable. Road networks become choke points. The decision to move must be made before these constraints fully manifest, not after. Timing is not just important, it is decisive. Moving too late places individuals into the highest density of panic-driven behavior, where risk multiplies rapidly. The escalation phase is where human behavior amplifies system failure. As resources become uncertain, demand spikes. This is not driven purely by panic, but by rational response to perceived scarcity. However, the system cannot accommodate sudden surges. Shelves empty faster than they can be restocked. Fuel stations run dry. Emergency services become overwhelmed. The very mechanisms designed to stabilize society begin to operate at maximum capacity, reducing their ability to respond effectively. This creates a feedback loop where perceived instability accelerates actual instability. Hidden within this phase is a principle rarely discussed. Fragility increases faster than awareness. People adapt to gradual changes, normalizing them even as conditions deteriorate. A 2-hour power outage becomes a 6-hour outage, then a full day. Each step feels like an extension of the previous one rather than a transition into a new state. This normalization delays decisive action, which is exactly what collapse conditions exploit. By the time the shift is undeniable, options are limited. Scientific analysis of disaster response consistently shows that the first 24 to 72 hours determine long-term outcomes, not because resources are immediately exhausted, but because initial decisions lock individuals into trajectories that are difficult to reverse. Choosing to stay, to move, to conserve, or to consume, all of these decisions have compounding effects. This is why early-stage preparation focuses on flexibility rather than fixed plans. A rigid plan assumes predictable conditions. Collapse is defined by unpredictability. The overlooked factor in most preparedness discussions is energy, not just electricity, but usable energy in all forms: fuel, calories, mechanical work. Every survival activity requires energy input. Carrying water, maintaining warmth, preparing food, securing shelter, all draw from limited reserves. When energy expenditure exceeds intake, decline becomes inevitable. This is where many fail, overestimating their ability to sustain physical effort under stress. Efficient energy management becomes as critical as resource availability. As systems continue to degrade, communication becomes fragmented. Information becomes inconsistent, delayed, or unreliable. This creates an environment where decision-making is based on incomplete data. The ability to interpret signals, both environmental and informational, becomes a survival skill. Recognizing patterns, filtering noise, and identifying credible sources of information can mean the difference between proactive action and reactive scrambling. This is not intuition, it is analytical processing under pressure. The transition into full collapse is marked by not a single event, but by the loss of recovery capacity. Systems no longer bounce back. Failures persist longer, repairs take more time, and resources become harder to mobilize. At this stage, external assistance becomes uncertain. The assumption that help will arrive is replaced by the reality that help may be delayed indefinitely. This is where preparedness shifts from temporary coping to sustained survival. And this is where the forbidden aspect of preparation becomes clear, not because it is hidden, but because it is counterintuitive. Preparing effectively requires acting against normal behavior patterns. It requires investing time and resources into scenarios that have not yet occurred. It requires accepting that convenience and efficiency are vulnerabilities, not strengths, in a collapse scenario. Most people resist this because it conflicts with everyday experience, where systems are reliable and disruptions are temporary. But systems do not announce their breaking point. They reach it quietly, then all at once. And when they do, the difference between those who prepared early and those who waited is not measured in comfort, it is measured in survival probability. The moment preparation transitions into action is rarely a conscious decision. It happens when a threshold is crossed, when waiting becomes more dangerous than moving, when conserving becomes more critical than consuming, when assumptions about stability are no longer defensible. This phase is defined by constraint. Options narrow, margins shrink, and every decision begins to carry weight beyond its immediate effect. What was once theoretical becomes operational, and the gap between knowledge and execution is exposed with absolute clarity. The immediate danger is not the absence of resources, but the misallocation of them. In early collapse conditions, most individuals still possess enough to survive, but they use those resources inefficiently. Water is consumed without accounting for resupply. Food is eaten based on habit rather than caloric strategy.